Hi, this is Michelle with Michelle's Macarons, and today I'm going to talk about food coloring for macarons. So I don't stick with one type of food coloring for macarons. I've found success with gel, liquid, even. I don't recommend liquid at first if you're just starting, and powder. So what most people like is the gel food coloring because there's not as much moisture, and when you're adding something to the shell of the macaron, you do not want to add more moisture. Okay, when you're first starting. When you're first starting, you really just shouldn't add any color, and you should make them white, and then once you get the shells down without any added food coloring in the shell, then you can start adding in food coloring. Because when you add in food coloring, you're adding moisture to your shell, and that can lead to some weird things happening in your shells. Now, if you want to get just normal pastel colors, just something light, gel would be perfect for that. So these are ones that most people like, these kinds of gel food coloring. But if I'm doing a pastel color, I really don't mind using liquid. Okay, a lot of people just totally write off liquid when they're first starting, and that is a good idea. But once you get the hang of your recipe and you can start making them a little easier, I would not totally write off liquid if you're doing a really light color, because it's easier to measure. So if I'm doing like a pastel purple or something, I can measure, okay, that is going to be 4 purple drops of liquid and 2 blue, or something like that. Like, I find it easier because when you're squirting out the gel, it kind of comes out in a blob and you can't control it as much. You can do a little toothpick, but still, I like to have the colors the same, so I like to measure in drops. Now, if you're just doing not a pastel color and not a really dark color, then I would say stick with the gels for those, or powdered food coloring. Gels can work for a lot of different colors. I just like the liquid because I can control how many drops I put in better than with the gel. Now, if you want to get dark colors, a really dark red or dark purple or dark blue, I always recommend, if you can, make it something that you can make it a flavor where you can put cocoa powder into the shell. So this recipe is good for that, for using cocoa powder in the shell, but that's really your best bet for making a darker color, especially when you're first starting, because you don't want to have to put that much food coloring in it. So you put the cocoa powder in the shell, and then it starts to darken it already. Then you just need to add a little color to show it which way to go, color-wise. And then do the cocoa powder, and then do either gel or powder. So powder, they're really good for getting really vibrant dark colors, because they don't have as much moisture in them. So they can be good for that. And they can even be good for lighter colors. You just have to really make sure you're not putting a lot in there. It's just a little harder to control. Now, for the powder brand, this is the one that has been really popular lately. And so when you're ordering them from their website, the Sugar Art has the Master Elites line, and then I think something called just Elite or something like that, but that's not what you want for coloring your batter. You want the Master Elite one for coloring your batter. So if you're enjoying this video, let me know by hitting the like button below. They'll have a section, they explain this on their website, but what everyone's talking about when they say the Sugar Art powdered food coloring in the macaron industry is that Master Elite line that the Sugar Art makes. So I'll put a link below for that, but they have some really great colors, but you really have to be careful because one speck of this powdered food coloring on your counter can make a mess. So put something down before you open it and really be careful, because I'm not kidding, 1 dot on something, or if you get it on your clothes, be careful when you're using this powder, and definitely don't sneeze when you're using it. Now, this is another problem people have with the powdered food coloring, is they try to use a bunch of it and it just doesn't really get the color they want. So when you're using this, start with a little bit and then kind of experiment. Okay, don't just add like a half a teaspoon of this stuff. Like, there's a reason the containers are so small. Like, you only need a little bit, even if you're trying to get a vibrant color. So go to their Instagram. They have a bunch of different tutorials and stuff about how to color your batter using these. But they are really popular right now in the macaron industry. Now, neon. So this is a question I get a lot. How do I get my macarons so bright? I like to use, there's usually the regular colors in a food coloring line and then the neon line. So if you're using gel food coloring, you can usually find a neon line. I'll link it below, but try to add some of those neon colors into your regular colors. So if I'm doing like a green or something and I wanted a bright green, or a blue and I wanted it to be a certain color, but I wanted to add some vibrance to it, I would use the regular food colorings and then add a couple drops of the neon blue. Because I wouldn't want to have a neon blue macaron, but I would just want a little more vibrancy in my regular blue. So you can try that, and usually the gel colors, they really help make the macarons more vibrant. Same with the powder. But using those neon colors really help as well, just to kind of bump it up a bit. Now, this is another question I get a lot. How do you get white macarons? So a lot of people will not put any food coloring in their macarons, and they will still come out with like a dull, kind of tan, browned looking macaron. So that can be a couple things. That can be from a couple things, but most likely your macarons are on a shelf that's too high in your oven or too close to the heat source. So if you can, lower it or get it a little farther away from the heat source so it's not browning on top. And if you can, adjust the time a little bit. Only cook them as long as you need to. Don't leave them in any longer. If you want to see more videos like this one, hit the subscribe button below and the bell next to it, and you will be notified whenever I come out with a new video. Okay, now if you've done all of that and you still are getting that kind of off-white color and you want like a bright white, my favorite thing to do is to add just a touch of like a violet, bluish purple food coloring. So if you're using a gel, I probably wouldn't use a powder for this because even a speck of that would probably be too dark, but I would maybe use a gel, or if you're using liquid and you're used to using liquid, just a tiny bit, like stick a toothpick in it and put that in there, because it will kind of cancel out the yellowish brown tones in the shell. I know that doesn't make sense, but I've explained this before in, I think, this video, but when you're using a color that's opposite from the other color on the color wheel, it cancels it out. So like I said in the other video, when you have like a foundation or something and it's redness control, there's usually just the tiniest hint of green. Because if you look at a color wheel, I'll put up a color wheel. Here, a color wheel. Red is across from green on the color wheel, so they will kind of cancel each other out. Purple across from yellow, blue, orange. So that's how, if anyone deals with hair stuff, if you have blonde hair and you want it to not have that yellow tone in it, you will use a purple toning shampoo. Okay, so that is what we're doing here. We're taking out that color, we're kind of toning the color and pulling out that color by kind of canceling it out with the purpley blue. Kind of go by what your color is on your shell. If your shell is more of an orangey yellow, use a more bluish purple, and if it's more yellow, then use more of a purple. But just a tiny little dot, okay? And kind of experiment with that. Now, when to add the food coloring. So I don't really talk a lot about food coloring because it doesn't matter as much as the other steps. A lot of different things can work out. Like I see a lot of people using the gel. I see a lot of people using the powder, and I always use the liquid. So there are people being successful with all different kinds of food coloring, so it's not that big of a deal. So if you find something that you like, just stick with it. Or kind of experiment. Don't only use what I'm telling you to use or someone else. As long as you can make the shells without food coloring to start, focus on that. Then you can not change anything else and experiment with food coloring. And if gel doesn't work for you, stop using it, or powder or whatever. Because what you can use is kind of affected by where you live and the humidity and temperature in your area. Like someone in where a climate that's very humid probably won't be able to use liquid food coloring like I can here. But also we have 100% humidity here sometimes, and the liquid still works. So just experiment with it, and maybe experiment with it a couple times so you're sure it's not like a fluke. Okay? So when you add the food coloring, I have added it in my meringue. So after I whip the egg whites and the sugar together and it's at stiff peaks or almost at stiff peaks, I will start to add the food coloring. I've done that with my liquid, I've done that with gel, and most people recommend it for the powdered food coloring. Adding it in with the egg whites. And I've seen a lot of people say you need to kind of let it sit in there for a bit. I never did that and it's been fine, but I think maybe that line of thought is because it needs to develop a little bit. So try what you want and see what works for you. But I've done all of them there, and then I've done all of them in the macaronage process, because usually I'm splitting my batter and I don't want to have one giant batch of red macarons. I want to have a giant batch of white that I can split into 5 batches and divide into different colors. So I wait until the macaronage stage. As soon as the batter comes together and the dry ingredients are just combined, then I will add my food coloring. So for me, that's at 40 folds. So go here if you don't know about counting your folds, and here. And when I hit 40, that's when I add my food coloring. So you could do that, but you do have to kind of make sure you know and have a plan for the color you're trying to achieve. That's the hard part about adding it then, because you only have so many folds to get that color right. So if you're mixing a color, make sure you know how much food coloring you need to put in of each color, because you have, for me, 20 more folds to get that right. Because if you're using liquid food coloring or gel, if you're using a lot of gel, you might have to fold a couple less counts than you normally would. Okay? I will link the different food colorings below, but really just kind of experiment and go with what works for you in your environment. Probably don't start with the liquid though. I would start with nothing, then I would try gel, then powdered food coloring. But the liquid is what I use and I love it, but a lot of people hear that and think that's absolutely crazy. But if you go watch this video, look how much liquid I put in there and it's fine. So just don't totally write off liquid food coloring, especially with measuring, and if you find a brand you really love. But remember that the amount of food coloring you put in affects the moisture level in your shell. So you might have to fold a little less, a little more, based on the color you're doing. So if I make a chocolate macaron and I'm putting a bunch of brown food coloring in, I don't fold as much for that batter as I do if I'm making like a pastel pink. So remember that when you're adding in, even gel has moisture in it, okay? So remember that when you're doing your brighter colors. If you want to start selling your macarons or any baked goods, join the email list below, and I have a course called the Home Bakery Blueprint where I teach you how to open your own home bakery business. We go over all of the business stuff that I know is confusing, like cottage laws, licensing, everything like that we go over. So sign up for the email list so you can be notified when a spot's open for that. If you're still having trouble making macarons, or you just want to learn from other macaron bakers, join the Michelle's Macarons Facebook group and post your pictures in there, or search. We have a search bar so you can type in food coloring, hollow macarons, anything like that, and all the posts about that will come up and help you make better macarons. If you'd like, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and I'll put those links in the description. Check out these other macaron videos. Okay, love you, bye.